The story is taken from Genesis 29 to 33. And it's such a fascinating story because Rachel has it all. She's beautiful, she has a man who just adores her, and yet she's always looking for more. And it's a story of a lot of our lives where God is blessing us richly in so many things, and we're so busy looking at what we want, we forget to be grateful for what we already have. And her story speaks a lot into that. So I hope you will enjoy it, and promise me you will read it tonight. Genesis 29 to 33, the story of Rachel. Families are so complicated, aren't they? Brothers, fathers, sisters, families. And some families just are more complicated and difficult than others. And I think the story of my family falls into that category. For my story is a beautiful love story, but it's also about sibling rivalry and a love triangle that was just devastating for our children. It all started, I'm the youngest in our family. I have a large family and I'm the youngest, so it's my job to look after the sheep. And I was bringing them in from the fields to the well to get water. Now, I can cope with the sheep really well. I'm always good at whatever I do. And I knew I could do it, but when I get there, I have to make sure that there is someone to push back the covering that keeps the sand out of the well. And it usually takes 2 or 3 strong men to move it. So even when I was on time, I would always have to wait for someone to take pity on a younger daughter and move the stone. And this day, I was coming in with my sheep and I was looking ahead to see were any of the people I knew who might be kind enough to open the well for me around. And I saw a stranger. And the stranger was definitely not from our town. He was dressed differently. His garments looked really nice and obviously expensive. But he looked very travel-stained. The hem of his tunic was filthy, his feet were a bit dirty, and he had lines around his eyes. He looked really tired. Anyhow, so I thought, well, I don't speak to strangers, so I'm not going to ask him. But then I noticed he was talking to the other men there, and they were all looking at me. Now, I have to confess, I've been told by my father I'm pretty. So for men to look at me, well, whatever, just open the stone, because that's all I really care about. Anyway, as I got right up to the well, the stranger looked at me, and then he turned out all by himself. He just moved the stone off the top. And then he started drawing up the water and giving it to my sheep. That's a labor. I just stood back and watched, because I don't mind if a man does my work for me. And as I watched, he finished with the last bucket and all of them had sufficient. And then he came over to me and he kissed me on the cheek and he started to cry. It was like, what's with all this emotion? Who is this man? And then he told me, he's my Aunt Rebecca's son. My dad's sister, who years ago a servant came and took her off in marriage to the land of Canaan, and we've never seen them again. This is Jacob, her son, and he's come to spend time with us here with my family. Anyhow, I left him in charge of the sheep, and I ran home to tell my dad Laban that this cousin has arrived from the wealthy side of the family. Now, I love my dad, but he loves money, and he remembered the wealth that servant brought. Gifts of gold bangles and jewelry and the lines of camel. So he ran to go and welcome this long-lost cousin into the family fold. And Jacob came back with us, and he settled in to stay for a while. You know, us ladies know when you guys like us. We know. We see the smiles, and you carry the water, and I knew that he really did like me. And he'd been there about 30 days, and all he got so far was a place to rest and his food. And my father called him aside and said, even though we're family, I need to pay you something. I can see you know what you're doing with livestock, and I want you to stay. So what would you What would you want to stay on? And I was on the other side, and I heard him say, you have 2 daughters. I will work 7 years for the hand of your younger daughter, Rachel, in marriage. 7 years. That's quite a price. I'm quite valuable. And so he started to work for me. And while he was working, he worked hard. We saw our livestock flourish. The herds grew tremendously. Our camels were multiplying. It really was a time of prosperity for the family. When I said to him, Jacob, 7 years, and he was like, it's like a few days. You're so worth it. I love you and I can't wait to marry you. And when those 7 years were up, he went to Laban and he said to him, now it's time. I've worked hard. For 7 years, I have been committed. For 7 years, I have grown your stock. Now it's time you give me your daughter in marriage. My father was, I suppose, yes, okay, we can do that. So he invited everyone from the surrounding towns to come and celebrate the wedding of Jacob with his daughter. And everyone came and the feast was amazing. But it wasn't me that my father led in the wedding ceremony. It wasn't me in my veil and complacency that was taken to Jacob's room. And it wasn't me who consummated that marriage. For my father put my sister Leah in my place. And when Jacob woke up in the morning and he saw it was not me, it was my sister, he was furious. Just imagine, 7 years, and I get switched brides. He was furious. And he went to my father and said, how can you do this? And Laban was, well, you know, you don't really understand because you're not from here. But here, we can't marry a younger daughter until the older one is married. So you have to marry Leah first. And yes, it is a custom, but he hadn't tried to find a husband for ugly old Leah. He had just had this plan all along. Jacob was really angry. But Laban said, listen, I know you're upset, but this is custom and you have to respect our custom. So what I'll do is, you're married to Leah. It's legal. It's binding. But in a week's time, I'll give you Rachel as well. And then you can just work another 7 years. And it was the only way that Jacob could have me, so he agreed. So Leah had her husband to herself for 7 days. And then I married him, the love of his life. And at first, I really felt sorry for her. Can you imagine a man has to be tricked into marrying you? Can you imagine knowing he's in love with your sister? And then slowly, the pity started to fade, because just like that, she was pregnant. And as the months passed, I was not. And she gave birth to a beautiful boy. And she called him Reuben, because she said, God has seen my sorrow and blessed me with a child. And then she fell pregnant again. And she had a son she called Simeon, because she said, God has heard my prayers. And then a third pregnancy. I am still the favorite wife, but I am childless. And she has a son and she calls him Levi, because maybe now my husband will favor me. And she has a fourth child. And she calls him Judah. Praise God for my sons. And I was so upset. This is years of waiting while she falls pregnant and nothing. And I went to Jacob and I said, give me children or I shall die. And he got really angry, because those words echoed back to what his brother Esau had said, give me food or I shall die. And it was part of the reason he was no longer at home, because he had stolen the birthright of his brother. And he said to me, who am I, God, that I can withhold children from you? So I decided if his God didn't want to give me children, I would do it our way. Now, when we got married, my father gave us each a gift. It's probably the only gift I can remember him giving us. He gave us each a slave girl. My slave girl's name was Bilra, and there was my sister's slave girl. So I decided my slave girl's children are mine. So I gave her to Jacob. Just like that, she fell pregnant. And she gave us 2 sons. And I was quite pleased. But somehow it was not the same thing as Leah, who just gave them herself. And then she copied me. Just like that, she gave her slave to Jacob and had another 2 sons. So she's now got 6 sons and I've only got 2, and they're only half mine. And time passed, and you know that anger sits and it bubbles and burbles inside of you. And then one day, her eldest, Reuben, was out in the fields, and he found mandrake. I don't know if you grow mandrake where you come from, but mandrake root increases fertility and desire. So I went to my sister, who's got 6 sons, and I said, can I have some of the mandrake root? She just looked at me with her weak eyes, and she said, you already took my husband. Now you want to take the mandrake root my son gave me. And I really wanted it. I thought maybe that if I could get that root, maybe I'd fall pregnant. So I made a trade-off. And I said to her, okay, if you give me that mandrake root, I know Jacob has not been near you for a while. I'll give you a night with my husband in exchange. She said yes. You know, she was so desperate. She went marching out. He hadn't even come back from the field. And she said to him, I've hired you for the night so that Rachel can have mandrake. And I didn't fall pregnant, but she did. With another son. And another son. And each one she praised God, this is my reward, this is my gift. My heart is full, what joy. And then she had a daughter. She had Dinah. And then Jacob's God smiled down on me. And he opened my womb. Suddenly, after all these years, I was pregnant. And I just knew it was going to be a boy. And I thought, maybe this is it. The first one is the golden one. And then after that, it's easy. And the pregnancy was amazing. And I gave birth to a beautiful boy. And I called my son Joseph. May there be many more sons after this. Now I can start to really compete with my sister. Because I am still the favorite wife. And now I have given him a precious son. Anyway, it was shortly after this that our lives changed somewhat. Because Jacob came to find us and he said, please come outside, away from the servants and the listening ears and the watching eyes. I want to talk to you both. And when we were all the way out in that field, he said to us that he'd heard from his God, Yahweh, that it was time to leave this place. And that he reminded us how Laban had cheated him of 14 years of labor. And how he had changed his wages 10 times since then of what he would pay. Always wanting to pay less. And that Laban and my brothers were saying that Jacob was going to take all the wealth out of the family. And there was this nasty, jealous feeling in the house. And he said, God has told him it's time to go home. Take your family and go back to your father's land that I promised you. Now, as much as Leah and I can fight like cats over our husband, we also both stand behind him. You know, in all the years that we have seen Jacob work for my father, not once has he put one coin aside for us. Not once. Not one coin. That's normal practice. That if our husband should leave us or die, we would have something. Not a coin between us. Not one for all these grandsons we have given him. He only cares about himself and my brothers. So we agreed, let's do it. We will follow you and your God back to your father's land. We didn't tell anybody. We didn't want them to know what we were planning. And we waited until my father was off shearing sheep, so he wasn't near the camp, and then we loaded up everything that belonged to us. The camels, the cows, the sheep, the goats, the donkeys, that were payment for the work Jacob had done. And Jacob put all of us, women and children, onto camels, and we headed out from Panam towards the land of Canaan. But before we left, I was still burningly angry with my dad. That all he cared about was what he could get out of Jacob, and nothing about us, his daughters. We were just something to be used for bargaining, to be sold, nothing more. So just before we left, I went into his space and I took the idols that belonged to the family. You know, the idols that bring prosperity and protection and are symbols of inheritance? I took them and I put them in my saddlebag. I couldn't tell anyone. And it gave me such joy as we rode. I could feel them against my thigh go clink, 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 clink. I hope my brothers enjoyed that. And we'd gone quite far, and we'd set up camp, and we had all our tents. Mine was right next to Jacob's, because I am the favorite. And then we heard hoofbeats. It was my father and brothers and all the men from the camp. And they came and said to my husband, "Why do you steal off like thieves in the night? Why do you take my daughters and sons without even a kiss goodbye?" Jacob said, "Go and look. There's nothing here we've taken that does not belong to us, that we have not earned." And I think my father might have got angry that he'd had a dream, and Jacob's God had come to him in that dream and said, "Don't you do or say anything to Jacob. He's under my blessing and protection." And then he said, "You can take what belongs to you, but you've taken my family gods. My inheritance, you've taken it." And my heart went cold, and I went back into my tent. And I heard Jacob say, "I have never touched your idols. I don't worship your idols. I would never take them. Whoever's taken them, I promise will be put to death." And I went in, and they were in my saddlebag. And I could hear them starting to search, and they went to the slaves' tents first. And then I heard them in Leah's tent and in Jacob's tent, and they were coming to mine. There's no time to get rid of them. There's nowhere to hide. So I just sat down on my saddlebags. And when my father came in, he was like, "Don't you rise for your father?" It's like, "Sorry, it's a ladies' time of the month. I can't stand up for you." Why not use my body that's betrayed me all these years as an excuse why I can't stand for my father? And I watched as they searched through every bag. They went through every basket, except the saddlebag I was sitting on. And I could feel it digging into my buttocks. And I just kept quiet. I said nothing. And they walked out. I can't believe they didn't find me, because I knew that oath would be binding. And then I heard Jacob take off at my father. "How dare you accuse me? I have never stolen from you. You're the deceitful one. Remember what you did with your daughters? Remember how you changed my wages?" Anyway, eventually the fighting settled down as the male egos subsided a little, and they built a boundary of stone. And they said this would be its territory line, and they wouldn't cross it, and they wouldn't take from each other, and that was the last time I saw my father or brothers. And we carried on going, and eventually we came to Shechem. And here we decided to settle for a while. So Jacob bought some land, and we set up our tents, and the flocks were growing, and we were doing really, really well. And we thought, things will be better now. But they weren't. For Leah's daughter, I was actually very fond of, decided to go for a walk. And she obviously takes after me more than her mother, for a man saw her beauty, and he desired it. So he took her. He kidnapped her. He took her to his home and raped her. And word was brought by the servants to Jacob of what had happened. And he did nothing until the older boys came home. And when he told them what had happened, they were furious. They were just, their eyes turned red. They were so hot with anger. They just wanted to rescue their sister. And men from the camps came and they said, we know what's happened, but he wants to marry her. That'll make it all right. He'll just marry her. He needs your permission. The brothers were no way. After what he's done, he's defiled our sister. He's a pagan. He's not getting Dinah. But the men carried on, requesting. He said, you can marry any of our women. We don't mind. Now, we know that we are wealthy. This is a way for them to get to our wealth. Anyway, my brothers looked at each other. They had a discussion, the brothers, Leah's boys. And they said, okay, you'll pay any price for this. This is the price. All the men in your town have to be circumcised, because we cannot give our women to uncircumcised men. And they agreed. And while they were vulnerable and deeply in pain, Leah's boys went down to the camps and killed every single man. Every single man. They rescued Dinah, and then they took all the livestock, the wealth, the women and children, and brought them home. And Jacob was furious. He was livid. He said, now all these people are going to fight with us, and there are more of us, more of them than us. They'll take us out. But the boys were right. They said, this is our sister Dinah. She can't be treated like a prostitute. And so with all the added wealth, Jacob decided it was time to leave. And he'd heard from God that we needed to move towards Bethel. That's where we had to settle. So we sold up and we started on the journey. And I didn't mind. Do you know why? Because God had blessed me and I was pregnant. And I just knew this was going to be a boy. And traveling pregnant's not that comfortable, but it's okay. And I gave birth to him. But the birth was hard. It was extremely hard. And I can feel my life ebbing away. And I've called him Ben-Ami for sorrow, for there will be no more children. And not only that, I know my life is coming to an end. And I know I won't get to see these boys grow. I won't know what becomes of them, of Jacob and his 12 sons. And that's the story of Rachel.